Well, good evening. Welcome. We're here with you this Thursday night that already last week we might have given a different nuance. And as a result of the multiple questions that were given and accumulated of sightings, we have Sixto Paz here. Welcome again.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
And taking advantage of the fact that he is still in our country, we decided to invite him again because there is a lot of material to observe of sightings that are very frankly spectacular, which also affects us as a country, and many questions that people want to decipher tonight. If you want to send a question to Sixto Paz, there's a hashtag to ask your questions. We spoke last week about the importance of Easter Island. You had a UFO sighting that, seeing these images, how was this visit generated and why was this UFO sighting so important that we are going to see in the images?
In 2006, the group that I am part of, we received the messages here in Chile saying that we should go to Easter Island to have an experience of contact with them and at the same time to connect with the hidden history, a different story of the planet Earth. And that part of those files with that information are on Easter Island. Then, at the last minute, Dr. Mario Dusuel, the psychiatrist, at that time advisor of the CEFA, joined. From the Commission of Investigation of the Anomalous Phenomena of the Chilean Air Force, he contacted me and told me, Don Sixto, I have found out that you are going to have a contact experience on Easter Island, which is part of the 5th region of Chile. And could I have the opportunity to accompany you? And Sixto said, of course, there's no problem. There are many people who consider that my person, as well as the contact group of which I am part of, that we need a psychiatrist, and urgently. Well, what better if he voluntarily offered to accompany us? He, together with us, since we arrived on the island, we were doing meditation practices that our group does, and we received a psychographic message, a form of psychic communication. You receive the mental wave and your brain automatically decodes it.
It's like what a medium does.
Yes, but in the case of psychography or telepathy, you are totally aware. In the case of a medium, the person is in a state of trance. So, in the supposed psychographic message of automatic writing, these beings told us what time, on which day, and where on the island these objects were going to appear. They told us at that time that it was going to be at the foot of the Poike volcano, next to the Ahu Tongariki, one of the 250 ceremonial platforms that the island has, where there are 15 statues that have been put back upright in that place. Of course, the psychiatrist, when he saw us receive the message, because it cannot be that easy, it will be real, it will be imagination. The day before the contact experience, we met together with the psychiatrist with the military of the Movavi airport in the town of Hangaroa. And we told them about the experience that we were going to have. They said, well, let's be attentive to the radar screens to see what happens. Usually the UFO is not easily detectable through radar. However, on that occasion, the airport military captured the presence of the same two objects that we observed on the Poike. We were 25 people, witnesses, including precisely the psychiatrist. Everyone saw it. Now, apart from this observation, and when we returned to the airport, the military confirmed us of the appearance that we had had. We go to certain places on the island and we did our practices. The group practices extrasensory perception or remote viewing. You can grab a stone, and that stone that has been part of a wall, part of a statue, and through touch, through dermo skin optics vision, through the skin, you can capture the history of the object, to whom it belonged, who did it, what was the intention, why it was done. That type of practices we do. So the group did several practices of this type, and we perceived that a spacecraft, an alien spacecraft in the form of a sphere, landed inside the Ranu Raraku volcano, which is the quarry of the Moai, and brought deported a group of lizard men, of reptilian-looking extraterrestrial beings to Easter Island. The psychiatrist accompanied us to speak with some Rapa Nui elders, and these elders told us that their myths and legends, God Makemake created the heavens and the earth. He created the earth inside an egg and experienced inside that egg love, passion, and feelings, so that we would see that if this was good, the whole world would break and flood the entire universe, and that there was also a time when the first inhabitants of the island were the Mokomen. A spacecraft in the shape of a sphere, pearl, landed inside the Ranuraraku volcano. Watching these beings that were deported from the reptilian-looking beings, as the psychiatrist had listened to the group's account, simply by touching the stones when he heard the account of the Rapa Nui elders. It cannot be possible that this information that they transmit coincides. They had never transmitted it before. They told it at that time and in front of the psychiatrist. So, through extrasensory perception, we could have access to this information. And we had done these practices before. We had been in Israel. We had gone to the Qumran monastery, and everyone touching a wall, the part that is not rebuilt. To do this dermoptic, and the group saw a child dressed in white who was leaving the monastery. 300 meters turned some Bedouins. So I made everyone just spread their hands and feel what it could be. At 40 meters, we felt that it could be that we all perceived. Because when one becomes sensitized, that kind of things happens. We walked with everyone about 40 meters, and the 3 cubic stones were on the ground. So let's see if all this that we perceived was true or not. In front of them, I scratched and took out the rest of the little pitcher that had been broken 2,000 years ago. Was there. That is called psychic archaeology, and that exists. Interpol, Scotland Yard, FBI uses psychics to solve criminal cases that cannot be solved in the normal way.
Sixto, you were talking about this sighting on Easter Island while we were looking at the images.
That's how it was in 2007. It was the year after when we went with the psychiatrist.
I would like you to tell us what is happening at the moment.
We returned to the island the following year to somehow consolidate all the information they had given us about the true history of Easter Island, and part of the history of our planet, which would be contained in this place, that Easter Island. It is a place that is a true portal to another dimension.
Sorry. I see you there at the airport.
There, we are getting off the plane, and suddenly, I tell the companions, look, observe what is slipping inside the Ranokau volcano. And then there it was, almost 12 o'clock in the midday. The object came out, and we asked the military there receiving the plane, have you seen there what that object is? Immediately they called the control tower. They said that they are already seeing it, but they don't know what it is. Now, we're going to go up to the edge of the crater later. We talked with the National Park Rangers of the Rapa Nui Park, and they tell us that nothing is flown because that object that actually appeared is a UFO, an identified flying object.
Why is it said that Easter Island is one of the most enigmatic and mysterious places on the planet?
Firstly, because in all of the Polynesia there are not the amount of archaeological monuments that there are on that island. 163.5 square kilometers, 70 volcanic cones, 250 ahus, ceremonial platforms, 887 statues weighing between 75 and 85 tons. Some of these statues were displaced from the quarry in the Ranuraraku, 17 kilometers from its location. Now, it has been said that Easter Island is the best example of the devastation on the part of the human being of the forests and nature. In the 21st book that I have published, The Sanctuary of the Earth, I vindicate the Rapa Nui population, and I rule out that the people of Easter Island find that they have finished with their palm trees. None of that is true. You can see it in the drawings they made with Jacob Rongeven, the Dutchman who officially discovered the island in 1722, the Spanish expedition of González Daedo from the end of the 18th century, the arrival of Captain Cook in 1774. With this German cartoonist who drew what the island looked like. The statues are standing. The trees are complete. The palm trees are everywhere. I mean, it is not true what is said out there back in the 16th century in its madness to create increasingly large, unbridled statues and to use trunks and palm trees as rollers. They destroyed the vegetation. That is not true.
What happened? Is there a thesis?
Of course, yes, the European ships that came began to rebuild their ships with the wood. They pulled it up and replaced nothing. On the other hand, also the steamships began to remove all the bonewood until 1872-74 with pier lot, and all you can see, all the complete vegetation.
Sixto, you mentioned here that this ship that would have descended to the volcano. What's up? What is inside the volcano? Because it is not the first time that I hear the relationship of volcanoes and UFOs entering. What are volcanoes? Secret bases? Are they portals?
You can see, for example, that in 2012, the cameras of a major television channel in Mexico were monitoring the activity of the Popocatépetl volcano, which is the emblematic volcano of Mexico City. It was erupting. On the other side were the cameras of the Mexican Institute of Volcanology. Well, both cameras capture an object in the shape of a cylinder of 376 meters long that enters the vertical.
More or less to get an idea, bigger than the coastal tower here in Santiago, which is the highest here in South America.
And the object enters the vertical of the volcano, and it enters the interior of it.
Here we are seeing the image. This is not it?
Here we are looking at images of 2013, that is, a year later, so you can see how, even though the volcano is in eruption, the UFOs enter and leave the volcano in full eruption. Their technology allows them. Now, it is not that they enter the interior of the Earth when it is in activity. What they do is they take advantage of the energy released by the volcano to open a portal to another dimension. They enter through here and leave through any other part of the world.
Let's stop here in this portal to another dimension, how it works. Sometimes in the movies they show a strange space, like a window, something like a frame, where people enter.
I tell you a real story, and you can verify it. In 1593, the Spanish soldier Gil Perez was in Manila, taking care of the governor's palace. It was hot. He was in armor. He leans against the wall, closes his eyes, seconds, and at that moment he opens his eyes and he finds himself in the Zócalo square, leaning against the wall of the Viceroy's palace in Mexico City. The other Spanish soldiers approach him and say, "Hey, you, where do you come from? Why is your uniform different from ours?" The Inquisition took hold of him, put him in jail, and he said, I was in Manila until a while ago, and I don't know how I got here. And a few days ago, the governor of Manila was killed with an axe blow in the head. The Inquisition could not find the explanation. They obviously considered the Spanish soldier innocent and did not link him to any act of witchcraft or anything like that, and returned him directly to Manila.
We are talking here with Sixto Paz. Do you have a question? Do you have a question? You want to contribute something to the special UFO we have here tonight in True Lies? After a break, use the hashtag SixtoPazMV. We're back. There's a lot of curiosity, many questions. We have a special program this Thursday night with Sixto Paz, who visits us here in True Lies, live and direct at 10:21. We have some questions that have been coming with the hashtag SixtoPazMV that you are seeing there on the screen. let's see one of them. Mr. Director, please. Manu Orellana says, I have information that 1 hour of ours is equivalent to more hours of extraterrestrial life. Do you know anything about it?
Well, that necessarily has to do with the speeds that they move in space, but it would not necessarily have to be like that. Mostly, there is a time correspondence unless they move through cosmic folds or interdimensional portals, and they have the technology to locate them or to create them.
Also, as Sixto Paz told us, there are more than 60 races, right?
That's right. There are 60 different races. There are beings with a reptilian appearance. There are beings with a humanoid appearance, a felinoid, who seem like felines. There are beings with an insectoid appearance. Generally, those who seek the most direct contact with us are the ones who most resemble us, or can assume an appearance like ours. Many times they are not how we are seeing them, because they know that we judge by appearances. Now, there are a series of races that are like the parent races that have been populating the universe. So both Orion can come to you, reptilian-looking beings, humanoid-looking beings, felinoid-looking beings, reptilian, have also evolved from felinoids and humanoids. Here also on Earth, if 65 million years ago the meteorite that led the dinosaurs to encounter would not have impacted us, probably the species that would have dominated the planet and that would have evolved intelligently, even preserving its condition, it would be the reptiles. But somehow, with the end of the secondary period and the beginning of the tertiary, what the planet itself strengthened were the mammals, and mammals, hence the primates, and hence the humans.
What do we do to be a part of your group?
You simply locate us on Facebook. You can find it as misionramachile.cl, and there's an account on Facebook where you will find a lot of information, all the data, the group meetings, and all the outings that the group makes.
It's an open group.
It is an open group, totally.
We were talking about Easter Island, this enigmatic place that belongs to our country, but there are also people who have wanted to ask some questions that we have. The aliens come in peace, or they come with bad intentions?
And most of them come with good intentions, but there are civilizations that are not well intentioned. But it is not so easy for these beings to enter our world. Ships like the one that crashed in Roswell in the year 47, the one that crashed in Baiwano in 98, here in La Serena, here in Chile, like a ship that also crashed in Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in Colombia, and the zone of silence in Durango zone, Coahuila, Torreon, Mexico, and more than 38 ships that have crashed in various parts of the world were shut down, not by terrestrial technology, but by other ships that are taking care of the earth, of those who do not come with good intentions. You can even find on YouTube a video from 1991 of discovery of the space shuttle where you can see the curvature of the earth and a luminous object at the angle of entry to the planet and other 7 objects that block its way and launch a kind of missile or beam light, forcing this object to make an incredible angle of departure and to leave at high speed where it came from.
That video of what year is it?
From 1991, and that also reminds us that the sacred scriptures tell you that there is a great violence in the skies. It would be necessary to verify if this object, due to its small size, is not a drone. There's always that possibility. For example, this object that we are seeing with a group of lights, the object that remains in the air, you have the impression that this object is static. You have the impression that this object is static in the air. And it is simply waiting for a clue at the airport, and it gives you the impression that the object is static and not moving. But if you are already 5 minutes in the air without movement and there's no noise and everything, we can already be talking about that it is a UFO, an identified flying object.
Sixto would tell one of our viewers that not all races come to Earth with good vibes, but there are a lot of races that do. You told us the other day that we are like a kind of experiment of other races who come to attack us, that some come with bad intentions towards us.
Well, somehow they are afraid that we could endanger the cosmic order. It's funny why, when I had the opportunity to be interviewed by exopolitics from Sydney in Australia to give them a lecture, take the opportunity to go to Ururu, the second largest monolith in the world, the stone of Ayers Rock, the Anangu, the Australian Aborigines tell you the story that the Wanjima, the gods of the sky, created the planet Earth, humanity. But humanity was told never to leave this planet, that this planet was our responsibility, and that it never occurred to us to look even further. I mean, they wanted to somehow hide from us that there are other realities. These beings are not gods. They are beings like us. So they had us as isolated. Then our planet was selected by extraterrestrial alien civilizations to carry out a sociological, anthropological, metaphysical experiment in which they are trying to extract information. One says, but what could they learn from us? It's like when you go to a lost tribe in the Amazon, you meet people who lived like men 50,000 years ago, naked, feeding on the trees. But it is a community that does not suffer from cancer. They do not have diabetes. They do not have bipolar depression problems. There's no suicide. They do not abandon their children, and even less do they divorce. I mean, who have to learn from whom, right? We can always learn from each other. Now, there are images also taken in 2004 by the Mexican Air Force. In other words, it was a 626 Merlin plane from the Mexican Air Force. They were patrolling the Campeche area between Mexico and Guatemala, where there's a lot of drug trafficking and many contraband planes. And suddenly, they, with their infrared cameras that report objects that emit heat, they captured 11 objects, one of which was the size of a 15-story building. You can clearly hear the testimonies of the military and everything. And the Mexican Air Force, after an exhaustive study, have the authorization for them to be made known on television, and the military themselves appeared giving their testimony. At first glance, they never saw anything. However, the infrared camera did capture the presence of the 11 objects. Well, somehow they are afraid that we could endanger the cosmic order. It's funny why, when I had the opportunity to be interviewed by exopolitics from Sydney, Australia, to give them a lecture, take the opportunity to go to Ururu, the second largest monolith in the world, the stone of Ayers Rock, the Anangu, the Australian Aborigines, tells you the story that the Wanjima, the gods of the sky, created the planet Earth, humanity, but humanity was told never to leave this planet, that this planet was our responsibility, and that it never occurred to us to look even further. I mean, they wanted to somehow hide from us that there are other realities. These beings are not gods, they are beings like us, so they had us as isolated. Then, our planet was selected by extraterrestrial alien civilizations to carry out a sociological, anthropological, metaphysical experiment in which they are trying to extract information. One says, but what could they learn from us? It's like when you go to a lost tribe in the Amazon, you meet people who, like men 50,000 years ago, naked, feeding on the trees, but It is a community that does not suffer from cancer. They do not have diabetes. They do not have bipolar depression problems. There's no suicide. They do not abandon their children. And even less do they divorce. I mean, who have to learn from whom, right? We can always learn from each other. Now, there are images also taken in 2004 by the Mexican Air Force. In other words, it was a C-26 Merlin plane from the Mexican Air Force. They were patrolling the Campeche area between Mexico and Guatemala, where there is a lot of drug trafficking and many contraband planes, and suddenly they, with their infrared cameras that report objects that emit heat, they captured 11 objects, one of which was the size of a 15-story building. You can clearly hear the testimonies of the military and everything. And the Mexican Air Force, after an exhaustive study, gave the authorization for them to be made known on television, and the military themselves appeared giving their testimony. At first glance, they never saw anything. However, the infrared camera did capture the presence of the 11 objects.
Here I have an interview that I find interesting about Miriam Guijon. Most of them are peaceful. Why don't they show themselves openly?
They do. What happens is that there is very little publicity about it. In July 11th of 91, an eclipse occurred over Mexico City, the most populated city on the planet Earth. There are almost 30 million inhabitants in the city from Mexico. An eclipse prophesied by the Mayans was expected to occur. The Mayans, in a codex called the Dresden Eclipse Code, is the German city of Dresden. The Mayans announced that the eclipse of July 11th of 91, that eclipse would mark the return of the beings of the stars. People were watching the eclipse over Mexico City, and at that moment, a UFO appeared over the city, and everyone saw it. There were many people who videotaped it. In Raul Velasco's program, Always on Sunday, where he has a variety program of several hours on Sunday, that they play all the songs, they dance, they do shows and everything. They dedicated all the hours of the program to the UFO and to the testimonies of the people, because everyone gave their testimony that they had seen the UFO. At the time of the eclipse, everyone was attentive, and from that moment, the most impressive UFO wave that has ever been recorded on any country began over Mexico City. Up to 5,000 objects were seen in broad daylight, and they were not balloons. They went against the wind. They joined, they formed into a single object, they separated. It was an impressive thing.
Regardless, why are they still so rare? Why do they have doubts? Because the scientific community still doubts this. Because if they come in peace, why don't they just show up?
You will remember when the perestroika process of the release of information took place, and the significant steps for the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. This was in the year 89. The TASS agency, Soviet official, known more for hiding information than for making it known, they reported that a UFO had landed in a public park in a place called Voronezh, 500 kilometers south of Moscow, in 89, more or less November of 89. Then, under the UFO in a public park, some beings of 3 meters high came down accompanied by a small robot that left a strange reddish crystal on the ground. That later it was verified that there was nothing similar here on Earth. So, taking advantage of this juncture of perestroika is that all this information is released, and it had been said that many other similar phenomena had already occurred on other occasions. Get off in a public park, and they left a token of goodwill, a little crystal, like a business card.
You who have been contacted, you who have had the opportunity to converse through telepathic communication, but who have seen them, have been in their ships, they tell you that they have been afraid of manifesting themselves to all humanity openly.
I mean, they're not afraid that we will harm them. Their fear is that they can harm us by defending themselves against our aggressiveness. that their closeness alone could be the trigger for our own destruction. Someone getting nervous squeezes a missile, and in the end, we end up contaminated and destroyed ourselves. So they keep their distances. They consider that humanity is in a precocious adolescence, and they are waiting for us to reach a responsible youth, which allows us to survive the intolerance, the stupidity, to anxiety, to selfishness. Right now, the great powers are threatening to wage war, and we already know what a war between the great powers would mean. The first time you get nervous and launch a missile. Nuclear missions fight alone and nobody else intervenes. So imagine what would happen to the world.
We are going to Aguas Calientes, Mexico, year 2013. There is also a video that is interesting that we want to share with you. Please, Mr. Director, year 2013 in Mexico, UFO sighting in Aguas Calientes. There are the images. What are we seeing? Sixto, please tell us.
100 people were gathered there. There were people from the local radio station in Aguascalientes. So we all began to meditate, and I told them, look, if one does meditation and they get in tune, we can create the conditions for a contact experience to occur. They, as they did not believe it much, and yet several objects appeared in the sky, making evolutions, some moving, some static, and doing a behavior that was intelligent. And everyone saw it.
Why is this previous step of meditation so important to the contacts that you usually have?
Meditation first allows you to leave your mind blank, and it is the best way to predispose a contact experience. So, do you want to hear what they're telling you? Do you want to hear that they invite you to meet it in a place, or that they invite you what day, at what time, and where they could establish a contact with you? What you have to do is meditation. Clear your mind, become receptive, and channel this message. Now, if you do it in a group, it is much better, because so several people receive the same thing.
It must be a special type of meditation, because I practice meditation, but these experiences have not touched me.
What happens is that you have not tried to do the meditation to do this type of reception. Many people do transcendental meditation or some type of meditation just to be in a state of stillness, seeking inner peace or inner communication, but you can also use meditation to seek a cosmic communication. I mean, looking for a communication bridge to communicate with the civilizations.
Any of us here in the study of the student boys who have come today, apart from our public, the people who are in their house, can they have any kind of observation or even contact?
It has been around 40 years ago that contact groups here in Chile existed, such as Pedro Bravo, Hector Valdez, Pedro Salaverry, and many other people formed the first groups, and the people who formed the groups were ordinary people, people from all housewives, professions, everything, and they had their own contact experiences. A moment ago, I introduced you to Jaime Villamandos, a lawyer who has had many experiences in various parts of Chile. For example, in the north, where the Licancabur is, they have had encounters with beings right here in Chile. I mean, you don't have to go to Peru or anywhere else to have the experiences.
Going back to this video of Mexico and Aguas Calientes, such as we talked about Easter Island, and this story reveals that it is related and is linking. It is joining with the history of the Rapa Nui ancestors. Also, when one sees without knowing much only the history of the Mexican peoples, there are many things that could be interpreted as an alien.
Naturally, the Mayans said that their ancestors came from the Pleiades and came to Earth through a serpent's tail or hollow reed. Today, they speak of wormholes or cosmic folds, interdimensional portals to travel through time and space. As the Mayans could have had it so clear as they could have known that the Earth was round. They had it clear that we have, at a distance from the center of the galaxy, there was a central sun that they called the Hunapku. That a pulse emitted from the center of the galaxy arrived every 25,000 625 years that coincides with the so-called Wheel of the Baktuns, that is, cycles of 5,125 years each. So, the Mayans had a spectacular astronomical and mathematical knowledge. They continually made reference to beings, that is to say, the gods that came from heaven. It is more. This, the pyramid of Mr. Pacal, that is in Palenque, that was in the era of the 50s discovered by Dr. Ruz there in Mexico. And it is a pyramid built on the crypt of a person. The interesting thing is that the earthenware 5-ton sepulchral that covers the body of Lord Pacal, whether he could not return or did not want to. The point is that the China shows a character in a position like that of an astronaut manning a spaceship. You don't have to have a lot of imagination. The archaeologists say no. What happens is that it was climbing the ceiba, which is like a sacred tree of the Mayans, fleeing in this case the monster of the earth. But none of your turn the position of that character, and it's like a spaceship. It's impressive. Now the common of the Mayans is 1 meter 55, 1 meter 60. The East Lord is 1 meter 74 centimeters, too tall for the ordinary Mayans, but in human form. There are many extraterrestrial civilizations, and it's not that they look like us, but we look like them.
So, we are the experiment?
We are starseeds. One day our technology will allow us to travel to other planets and accelerate the life process, and when intelligent life arises in those other worlds, for those beings we will be like their gods. Then we will have to make them understand that we are simply collaborators with nature, and we will remain in their myths and legends that the gods or envoys of the gods came and promised to return one day. Already now they are talking about recreating an atmosphere on Mars that allows Mars to be habitable. So it is already talking about how we could rebuild the atmosphere of Mars. Can you imagine what happens when life arises there? What will we say to these first beings that come out of there?
Sixto Paz is with us. There's a question that we like to ask you. Come in, please. We have received interesting questions from a child. We will put it here again so you can see it. Look how interesting. A question from this child. Do the extraterrestrials look like insects? Sixto Paz will answer my friend when we come back after a break in True Lies. I have a question. Do aliens look like insects?
Some of the extraterrestrial races have the appearance of insects, or are. Evolved beings, but with that appearance. Really, there are. And I wanted to tell you, just as much for the children, for the women, for the elderly, you wanted to tell them that tomorrow I will have the opportunity to give them a totally free lecture. This will be at the Pedro Aguirre Cerda Cultural Center. This is in the Long Street commune, starting at 4 in the afternoon, where I will be able to answer all your questions there in Calle Larga Street in the commune. Everyone is invited, but especially for women and children, and also for people of the third age. And we are going to touch on the subject of true communication, that is, how we can improve communication with ourselves, but also with the universe, how we can develop our psychic potential. That will be very interesting for all you, and also remind you that at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow in the same place, the Aguirre Cerda Cultural Center, there in Calle Larga, we are going to give a free open conference, open to the public, so that all of you can hear the message of the aliens. What message do these beings really bring? We're going to show spectacular images. I want to thank the commune of Calle Larga for making us this invitation for this conference, being given to all public free for all.
We can make an advance of what is the message of the extraterrestrials for this talk.
Well, firstly, the world is not going to end.
Isn't it going to end?
It is not going to end. In fact, the world is transforming. It is undergoing a metamorphosis, a great transformation. Now, this transformation occurs every 26,000 years. Every 26,000 years, there's a pulse. Every 26,000 years, there's a pulse. There's an energy that comes from the center of the galaxy that reaches our solar system and is the true cause of climate change. In other words, you are seeing that it's not only climate change that is happening in the world. Seismic and volcanic activity is increasing. A spectacular crack has just opened in Kenya, and it is estimated that it's opening for 5,000 kilometers, and it is going to separate a complete piece of Africa from part of Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia. They are going to go outside of Africa, and they are going to form a new continent. Remember that originally there was a single continent called Pangaea. With time, later it split into Gondwana and Eurasia, and later on all the continents that we all know. And they continue to split, and now with all the planetary changes that are taking place, the changes are much more violent. You see the images of what is happening in Kenya, the incredible cracks that have formed, about 15 meters deep, 20 meters in diameter, a dreadful thing.
In a while, they can Google and see these images that sound spectacular. This change occurs every 26,000 years, according to the Mayans, exactly every 25,625 years. What happened the previous time that the Earth went through this change?
Mammoths were frozen to death, and that which were woolly mammoths were protected from drastic temperature changes. All that time, there was no human civilization capable of causing the greenhouse effect. That is, there may be a new ice age. You have seen the mega storms that have occurred in both North America and Europe that froze the functioning of all these countries and everything. But imagine if this was something permanent. I mean, it can happen, but it does not have to happen. In other words, human beings have unlimited potentials. We are also going to talk about this tomorrow for the elderly, children, and people in general at these conferences. If many people come together with the same intention, we can create a positive collective mental state that we can reverse the planetary future. These are the first messages they gave us 44 years ago. The prophecies are not given to be fulfilled, but not to be fulfilled.
As a warning?
It is always to warn, to correct. If the future were inexorable, where would be the most sacred thing that we human beings received from God, which is free will? Now, any variation, however minimal, will bring a different future.
Sixto, you just mentioned this about prophecies. Here they start to intersect with faith, with religion. Last week, with what we were talking about, you mentioned this encounter that you had with Jesus. How do we imagine it with Western iconography?
First of all, trying to get down to earth a bit, there was a world meeting here in Chile, in the Quintero area, in the 5th region. So 120 people from 15 countries met, all people who have had experience contacts. Many people from Chile, who they have had contact experiences. We met there in Quintero. There's a lagoon and there is a geological fault there. So there are very intense energies. We spent 6 days camping, and there were sightings of ships in broad daylight, in the afternoon and at night. Objects flew low over the lake and flashed flashes of light, making a hill glow. So we took the group, this 120 people, to this hill, and there were people who placed themselves in this position, and there was an object that was placed on top of the hill, and it began to fall like snow. Then, on the palms of the hands, they began to form like crystals. We call this within the contact group cesium crystals. Cesium is an alkaline metal that has a lower melting point than the body. The body is hotter and dissolves in an aqueous medium. The body is mostly water. These crystals, in a plasma state that can be seen and felt, are incorporated into the body and form a kind of a chakra or additional plexus, allowing you to really channel much of this radiation of energy that is coming from the center of the galaxy as a result of changes and mutations of the end of the cosmic cycle. Well, people lived this experience with complete clarity, and while people were receiving this, a being of more than 2 meters tall, dressed in white, appeared, walking around all the people, and people did not react. Said an alien, and 120 people, or most of them, witnessed the presence of this being there. This being has told us to prepare ourselves because an experience of Sendra, a dimensional portal, was going to take place. That is, since the contact experience began in the year 74, the ships choose certain places where there is a crossing of energies of very powerful lines of the Earth and act as a space of energy bombardment that makes a dimensional portal open. What you usually see is a distortion, as if it were a mirage. If you see it during the day, it is like a mirage. It is a shine, and it is like a mirage. Now you go through it, and you can appear from the other part of the universe. It is incredible. And there's no time correspondence between what you live there and the time that happens here. At night, what is usually seen is a luminous dome. That is, a golden crescent that pulses, or just a grayish dome. That is, the experiences can be at different levels. In the year 74, we lived that experience, which allowed us to reach Ganymede, one of the 16 moons of Jupiter, and other companions, even Apu, to planets of the star Alpha Centaurus, at 4.2 years away. Those experiences were published in the first book by Juan Jose Benitez, UFOs SOS to Humanity, of the year 74, and 3 years later was the experience of Corporal Valdez.
I don't want to get lost with the subject of Jesus.
That experience was already replicated many years later there in Quintero. That is, this Sendra was going to be formed. They warned us that we prepared to live the experience. Then 14 people were selected from the 120 people that we were, because only 4 would have the authorization to enter the dimensional portal. So 14 people were selected. I did not include myself. I put other people there for them to live the experience, because I have had already similar experiences, so what for? Then, as it was not seen that the luminous dome was materializing anywhere, I made the whole world spread, and we began to meditate. So, there was a moment in which I was next to the lake, and I had physiological needs, so I had to go pee. So I went and got inside some trees, and suddenly I found the luminous dome. It was like a half moon between bright and purple. At that moment, I wanted to turn around to look for all my companions to tell them, hey, here it is. And at that moment, a very thin, copper-colored being of 1 meter 90 comes out, without hair, with small eyes, a small mouth too, as if it were another phalanx in the fingers and everything, with a light suit, and he mentally told me to accompany him. Then I had no choice but to follow him. Then inside the Sendra, you feel the sensation of dizziness, of weight loss. You feel that your whole body burns, and suddenly, almost instantly, you appear in another place, in another reality. So occupying about 15 to 18 times the horizon in relation to what you would see the sun was the planet Jupiter. And you were on a plain, in the background, some mountains. In the background, structures in the form of domes. They have controlled the atmosphere only around their cities. So, we have been walking with this being. He took me to a house in the shape of a dome, and he told me that we had to wait for authorization to approach a kind of a main dome. So we were there, and then entered a sphere. We called it Canepla, or Foo Fighter, which is like an alien drone in the form of a sphere, like an electronic eye. He entered and told him that we were already authorized, and from there we have been going out towards a gigantic structure. We have entered, and there was like a side ramp that went up to a room like events. There were quantity like works of art made like metal that really looked like recreations of the solar systems and the same universe, really like an exhibition hall. and in the background there was a person dressed in white, thin, about 1 meter 80, long hair but not blonde, but a long dark hair, clear forehead, aquiline nose, and skin tone was not white, but it was like that of the Arabs. And I obviously began to feel a tremendous emotion. I did not know who this person was, but I began to feel something but extraordinary. And skin tone was not white, but it was like that of the Arabs. And I obviously began to feel a tremendous emotion. I did not know who this person was, but I began to feel something but extraordinary. Then the sphere came. I first approached this person, and then this other being approached, and there came a time where they already told me to approach. Then when I approached him, he extended his hand. The tunic that he had was gone, and at the height of the wrist, not on the palm of the hand, at the height of the wrist, it had like a keloid, a scar that was pink in color, and there was a glow, and I could see him. I touched his hand. Physical. It was not a hologram projection. It was physical. His hand was rough, like that of a person who has worked with his hands. I don't know how he answered me, if it was mentally, if I understood him. I don't know if by work of grace. I don't know how it was, but I asked if he was the person that I thought or considered him to be, and he told me, "What does your heart say?" My heart is in my throat now. So I asked him what he was doing there. How had he been there? And he told me that about 40 days after he was resurrected, they really took him away on a ship. And indeed, he resurrected. Now, he is not an extraterrestrial. He is a terrestrial extra, which is different.
What is the difference between an extraterrestrial and a terrestrial extra?
First of all, aliens believe in reincarnation and successive lives, but not like certain Eastern religions that say that one can reincarnate into an animal. According to them, there is no involution, no regression. Nobody is sent back to elementary school because they did bad in college. That is, one has to repeat the degree, the year, as many times as necessary to pass to the immediately higher plane. Then they consider that Jesus was a human being from Earth who, through multiple incarnations on this planet, reached a high level of evolution. And he no longer needed to reincarnate. However, for the love of humanity, he agreed to return. For 30 years of his life, Jesus prepared himself for a cosmic symbiosis, a transmigration to take place during the 3 years of his public life. We live in a 7-dimensional material universe. We have 7 bodies to act in the 7 dimensions of the material universe. We are like the matruskas, or the mamuskas, the Russian dolls, those little dolls that are one inside the other. We, apart from the physical body, have more subtle bodies, including the soul, the spirit, the essence, and everything. The point is that beyond the 7th dimension, as in music, in a higher octave, there is a universe parallel to this one that is no longer material. It is mental. And the beings that come from there are no longer extraterrestrial, terrestrial, or intraterrestrial. They are ultra-terrestrial. They are what we know as the true angels, archangels, thrones, principalities, cherubims, seraphims, powers and denominations. And there was a group of extraterrestrial beings who had been the true creators of the material universe on behalf of the essence of God, as we want to call him. These beings are called the Helal, the resplendent ones, the sons of God. In this case, they would be the archangels. One would be Michael or Michael, another Lucifer or Luzbel. They would be the true creators of the material universe. An 8th, 9th, and 10th dimension would correspond to this mental universe. And there would be, from the 11th dimension up, a 3rd universe that would be spiritual. That is, the spiritual universe created the mental universe. The mental universe created the material universe. And this material universe has had multiple creations. This is not the first, nor will be the last one. Now, it's curious why quantum physics is currently showing the existence of parallel worlds and dimensions, multiple dimensions.
Sixto, you are relating that you had this encounter with this being. It gives the feeling that it was Jesus.
The impression that I have and what I perceive of who is the teacher Jesus.
It shows you the wounds of the crucifixion.
Some scars, but on the wrist, not on the palm of the hand.
This first being that takes you.
This being is called Mardos, from a planet called Silox.
Why are they taking you into the presence of Jesus? Because they took you, only you.
They did not take me alone. In the end, we were 4 people who had the same experience.
But because they take you before him, what was the meaning?
Well, first of all, because within what would be the sacred history or what is mentioned in the Bible, there is continuous reference to the presence of these beings. In the Bible, we are told that Moses climbs the top of Mount Horeb in the Sinai and has a close encounter with the Shekinah. The day like in a cloud, at night like a fiery torch. And the book of Exodus says that under the cloud was a sea of bronze and glass. That is, the cloud hides a metal object that had windows. Because people could not really see the ship, it was hidden in this camouflage, like this cloud. Because if people had seen what shape the ship had, today we would have that the altars would have the divine shape of God in a flying saucer. And to avoid that phase and the association, on the one hand, it is said that Elias was snatched by a chariot of fire in front of an eyewitness, his disciple Elisha. Why doesn't the Bible say it was a flying saucer? Because they were not technical terms that were not used at that time. Ezekiel describes the glory of God descending before him on the Kebar River during the captivity of the Jewish people in Babylon. And Dr. Joseph Blumrich, NASA's advisor on spacecraft designs, designed as the object described in it should have been on the book of Ezekiel. And it is a type of ship with the vertical takeoff command module. And the most curious thing is that the design made by Joseph Blumrich, and then in 1991, the same object was seen in Mexico and also in Portugal.
But because they take you before him, what was the meaning?
Because there is a connection within what is the cosmic plan. That is, why the Earth has been chosen. We were selected as a planet to learn to love and to teach to love. Then Jesus came to remind us all, including aliens, that love is the most powerful force in the universe, that he is even capable of overcoming death. Death does not exist. Death is like the final exam at the end of the school year. If you studied, you would have nice vacations and you are better prepared for the next year. Now Jesus is resurrected, and there is a scientific proof of his resurrection. That is the Holy Shroud of Turin, that it is false, that it's false. It is among the few true things in our world. NASA and the Brooks Institute and Lotec came to the conclusion that the impression of the image is by radiation of light energy, is a radioactive impression, and the most interesting thing is that the 2 lepton coins appear on the eyelids that have just begun to circulate 3 years before Jesus was crucified, and one of the coins is from the same year he was crucified. Why, that year the coin was rolled in honor of Livia Julia, Tiberius' mother. It came out with a crackling arrow, a flipped letter. The coins that appear printed on the sheet and was covering the eyelid, the letter was flipped. There were also coins that had a very short time circulating.
Sixto Paz with us. We still have space for questions through the hashtag. The encounter with Jesus. The nature of his existence. What is the message he is leaving us?
He is really supervising which extraterrestrial civilizations who we sometimes mistake for angels and give us a hand. Whether they help us or not really interfere with the evolutionary process of humanity. Now, as he taught us that love is the most powerful force of the universe and got to take his message to the last consequences, when they're at the top of the cross, said, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Jesus, at the top of the cross, did not say, now all these miserable people are going to pay when I come down. Then he taught us that love and forgiveness is the supreme exaltation. A day will come when the humanity of the earth will know that we have been the victims of a cosmic conspiracy, in which extraterrestrial beings have experimented with us, have even wanted to kill us. That is a bit of the history of our world. We currently have a group of aliens who were deported to Earth who died here in our world. They are trapped in another dimension, and from there they have declared a psychic war on humanity, as well as the story of Jose in the Old Testament, that his brothers feared because of that ability he had to anticipate the future, of interpreting dreams. They tried to prevent the fulfillment of their destiny, and the more they tried to prevent it, the closer they got to it. And when Jose had the opportunity to take revenge on his brothers, what did he do with them?
Sixto Paz with us. We still have space for questions through the hashtag. The encounter with Jesus. The nature of his existence. What is the message he is leaving us? I looked at the number of questions that are coming. For some people, the fact of mentioning Jesus, this encounter of Jesus affects them because for many, it is an untouchable issue. Have you had a chance to tell this story with people of faith? How have they taken it?
Within our group, we have several Catholic priests. Some of them already quite old, and they totally agree with many of the things mentioned. I'll tell you that I was in Seville, in Spain, and a doctor who is the doctor of a cloistered monastery told me, do you want to meet the Mother Superior and everything? We went, and behind some colonial bars were the Mother Superior and two nuns, older too. And the doctor told her Mother Superior, here I present my friend who has had the experiences of contact with aliens. Then the Mother Superior said, that is interesting. I congratulate his experiences. And behind the nuns appeared a very old, bent nun with the blue leather apron and with the sleeves rolled up, saying, where is the extraterrestrial? Where is the alien? Then the Mother Superior said, no, Sister Perpetua, it is the Lord who has had contact with the extraterrestrials. And the elderly nun said, I am convinced that this is true, that we are not alone. An old woman, a nun from a cloistered convent in Spain. What happens obviously is that they cannot say many things, but there are priests who are more than convinced of this other reality.
They ask, does the conception of Jesus in the story of the Star of Bethlehem have to do with an extraterrestrial encounter and a superior plan?
Of course, yes. Look at chapter 2, verse 9 of the Gospel of St. Matthew. It says that the Star of Bethlehem led the wise men and stopped at the place where the child was born. Since when can a star be seen indistinctly by day and by night? And even less can it stop at the place where he was born. Now, Jesus was not born 2018 years ago. There are 7 years of error in the calendar. In the 8th century of the Christian era, the Emperor Carlomagno decided to modify the calendar that until then was governed by the founding of Rome. He said, no, I want it to be from the birth of Jesus, but no one knew when Jesus was born. Historiographic investigations were made, and it was learned that 200 years before Charles the Great, Dionisio the Mere, a monk, had discovered when, according to the foundation of Rome, when Herod the Great had died. Herod had died 4 years after Jesus was born. 4 years of the date were not taken into account. But Herod's death, there was already a 4-year error in the 16th century. Pope Gregory made another modification to the calendar to introduce leap years, and the margin of error did not decrease in 3 years. It increased in 3 more years. Therefore, we are not in the year 2018 after birth of Jesus. We are in the year 2025. And it is interesting because in Peter's letter, he says that for God, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like one day. Since Jesus came to date, 225 years have passed, and we are already in the third millennium. If for God 1,000 years are like a day, and a day like 1,000 years, we are already in the third millennium, the third day. When people talk that the 3 days of darkness are coming, and that there is going to be a catastrophe, it is simply an error of interpretation. What is being talked about is these 3 millennia of darkness in which humanity has lived. And now, that information is beginning to be released everywhere. It is precisely the end of all this that had been hidden from us, being in the era of accord. Everything comes to light. Everything is known.
Sixto, if this is what you tell about the difference of years, that is not 2018, but it is.
Nor was he born on December the 25th.
Sure, wouldn't that ruin the story you told us a moment ago about the coins that appear on the Holy Shroud by the date they were cradled?
No, because precisely all these alterations of the calendar are taken into account.
Perfect. With that new measuring mechanism, here they also tell us, would the angels also be extraterrestrial?
Angel in Greek would be messenger. In Hebrew, malach or malachim, the hidden, the incomprehensible side of God. Then it was incomprehensible how these beings could come from the sky, go up, go down, and the behavior that we find in the angels in the Bible is very curious. Chapter 6 of Genesis says that when man began to populate the earth, they begot daughters, and seeing the sons of God, the angels of heaven, that the sons of men were beautiful in their eyes, they took from among them as many as they wanted and procreated. The ancient heroes of yesteryear. If someone had gotten the idea that all angels were immaterial beings with a girl's face and wings on their backs, they're totally wrong, because the same Bible tells us that sometimes they behave like sailors in a distant port and leave the family spread.
You ask here other episodes of the Bible like Noah's Ark. Do you have any explanation from this point of view?
Let's remember that many of the things that are mentioned in the Bible were taken from the Sumerian myths. Remember that Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldeans, that is, a city with a very ancient history of Sumerians. So many of these myths were taken from the earlier towns or peoples. But what if the myth of Noah does not refer to the legendary Atlantis? When Hernan Cortes arrives at the court of Montezuma, the king of the Aztecs, receives him and tells him, "My great lord Quetzalcoatl, as you all know, we Aztecs are descendants of the ancient Aztlan, a continent island beyond the seas where the Hurons take flight at dawn." That is, it does not refer to the Nayarit, but to the east. So what happens if somehow all the peoples remember the existence of Aztlan or Atlantis, a place from where somehow a group of mestizos were reunited between aliens and human beings from Earth, and that unfortunately they misused the knowledge of technology received?
What is psychic warfare?
These entities that are not physically here are trapped in our world. They died here and cannot escape from here. When we die, our physical body dies, and after 3 days, your astral body normally dies, which is your body of emotions and desires, that is attached to the physical body through an umbilical cord of energy, which is called the silver cord. Chapter 2, verse 6 of Ecclesiastes. In the Bible it says that when a person dies, his silver cord is broken. The Bible says it before Lapsan Rampa says it. The third vehicle is the lower ego, the character, the personality, that also die with you. The human being is like an actor in a play. After the work, you take off your makeup, your wardrobe, you look behind the scenery, the script, and you go out on the street as an actor, not as the character. What a problem would be if that after the work you would still believe yourself the character. Then you go to the fourth dimension. The fourth vehicle is the higher mental, the body of the faculties, psychic, your extrasensory perception, and you prepare for next incarnation. In other words, the fifth vehicle is the soul, the cathedral of the spirit, the gathering of our experiences from our previous lives. The sixth vehicle would be the consciousness, and the seventh vehicle, our essence. So when a person dies violently and does not want to accept that he died, or the relatives do not want to accept that the person died, or died so violently that they did not even know that he had died, he can be trapped in the lower astral. That is, the physical body dies, but the astral, the lower mental, does not die immediately. It has a long agony that can last days, months, or even years. Those are what we call the ghosts.
But did they die here?
They would be trapped here in our world because some strange crystals were also left that prevent these beings from leaving our planet.
Okay, they are trapped. In this psychic war that they declare to us humans, how does it show?
They manipulate weak people, weak of character, of will, and place these people in politics, in religion, in the economy, in military commands, in fashion, in music. That is, there are like 300 families, like 13 clans of people who are at the service of these entities. And it is they who, in exchange for power, and in exchange for all kinds of luxury, fame, and everything, somehow control this planet on behalf of these beings. They are people who have somehow sold their souls already, and then these people don't mind leading the world towards self-destruction. That's why they threaten nuclear weapons and all that, because somehow they are working for those dark forces. Now, just as there is a negative internal government of beings that physically manipulate a part of the humanity, they cannot manipulate us all because they are not alive. There's also a planetary positive secret government. Thousands of years ago, an interplanetary peacekeeping force made up of 32 extraterrestrial beings from 32 different civilizations landed in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and they founded the mythical Shambhala, the capital of Agartha Kingdom of the interterrestrial world. They established, through a network of tunnels and galleries, large repositories of the archives of the knowledge of the lost history of humanity, with a view that one day humanity could have access to that knowledge. One of those entrances is in the valley of Choquehuas, there in La Serena, here in Chile. Another of these entrances will be found near San Carlos de Bariloche. The famous Nintzemapoc, the famous interterrestrial city, in the city of the Césares, there in the Uritorco area in Capilla de Monte in Córdoba, Argentina. In the late 19th century, Nicholas Roerich, a Russian explorer, came into contact with the people of Shambhala, and they showed him one of those crystals that are what hold these entities, who are trapped in our world, the so-called Chintamani stone. Then they showed it to him here in the Himalayas, in a network of tunnels, that is. The aliens say that the earth is not hollow. The pyrosphere, or the barosphere, which is the incandescent core of the earth, is not an interior sun suspended in a vacuum, and that there is a civilization in the internal part. No, because, but what was the source of the volcano magma? What they say is that between 4 and 20 kilometers deep from the earth, there is a network of tunnels and galleries that cross the entire planet. To Rafael Calderon, a friend of ours from our group there in Ecuador, he has had the opportunity to repeatedly go down to the interior more than 100 meters in free fall into the Cave of the Tallos in Ecuador, in the area of the Coangos River, and explore a good number of kilometers through this network of tunnels and galleries, and meet beings up to 3 meters high, there in the interior of the Tallos. Now, the most interesting thing was that the priest who really knew about that cave was Father Salesiano, Father Carlos Crespi. In the 1920s, he was sent by the Vatican to acquire archaeological pieces to send them to the Vatican Museum. Now, of every 3 pieces that the father bought from the indigenous who took them out of the interior of the Tayos caves, 1 would send it to the Vatican, another one would sell it, and another would keep it, but without the Vatican knowing it. Now, the one he sold, he used it to build schools for children, orphanages, hospitals. He did a lot of things. And the piece that he kept was to create a museum for Ecuador. That all his cultural material was not lost. Today, Father Crespi, a father considered a saint in Ecuador. Within the pieces that were extracted from the interior of the Cueva de los Tallos, there are some gold plates with some strange ideograms or symbols, which is very similar to the Gregorian chant. So, as Father Crespi was an expert in music, he saw that these symbols were like modulating the voice, and that by singing what was on these plates, they would allow you to enter a state of consciousness and allow you to come into contact with the quantity of information that it is recorded in the Akashic record with the planet. And the piece that he kept was to create a museum for Ecuador, that all his cultural material was not lost. Today, Father Crespi, a father considered a saint in Ecuador. Within the pieces that were extracted from the interior of the caves, of the Tayos caves, there are some gold plates with some strange ideograms or symbols, which is very similar to Gregorian chant. So as Father Crespi was an expert in music, he saw that these symbols were like modulating the voice, and that by singing what was on these plates, they would allow you to enter a state of consciousness and allow you to come into contact with the quantity of information that is recorded in the Akashic record with the planet. And the piece that he kept was to create a museum for Ecuador, that all his cultural material was not lost. Today, Father Crespi, a father considered a saint in Ecuador, within the pieces that were extracted from the interior of the Cueva de los Tallos, the Tallos caves, there are some gold plates with some strange ideograms or symbols, which is very similar to the Gregorian chant. So as Father Crespi was an expert in music, he saw that these symbols were like modulating the voice, and that by singing what was on these plates, they would allow you to enter a state of consciousness and allow you to come in contact with a quantity of information that it is recorded in the Akashic record with the planet.
We return to the question of whether the island of friendship exists, and is it related to aliens?
The maximum that I had gone south of Chile was until Concepcion and Talcahuano, because now in these days I had the opportunity to arrive in Castro, that is, there in Chiloé. We gave a conference, many people attended, it was impressive. If I have had a chance to speak with the Chilean Navy officials who have confirmed to me that they have seen islands that appear on the horizon and do not appear on the charts. And when they return with the torpedo boats to search, they dive in front of them. They go under. So there are underwater extraterrestrial bases throughout this area of Chiloé. Now, that there is an island called Friendship, I don't know. But I would not be surprised by the development of aliens around the world that finds the alien community that helps. So if they do, like Joseph Guijarro, a Spanish journalist, a very important Catalan journalist for several magazines, traveled to verify it skeptically in his car, broke down while going to take interviews in various farms. And when he went to look for help, the UFO came out in broad daylight. He really knows, and well now, that we have... So now that he really knows, well now, that we have really been seeing extraordinary, unusual things happening in this area of Chiloé. So there might be underwater bases between the islands.
How is the change of dimension, and when and how long is it until the great manifestation? our guest tonight, Sixto Paz, about this crack that opened in Kenya.
Well, first of all, the Mayans in the Chilam Balam de Chumayel, in the book of the fortune teller, of the witch Hawar, or the things that are about to happen, or to happen, they had prophesied that on December 21st of 2012, according to our calendar, there would be the tuning of time, or the synchronization of times, that is. Why many people mistakenly interpreted that as December 21st, the end of the world would come. They never spoke of the end of the world. What they were talking about was the end of a cosmic cycle. Nothing else, and the beginning of a new cycle. Then, it was the moment when that pulse would arrive with the greatest force. That energy, that radiation of violet light from the center of the galaxy, and that would accelerate mutations. We are already seeing it. The rift in Africa is as a preview. The mega storms that we have seen in Europe and the United States and Canada is another warning. The hurricane of Patricia, Grade 7, are signs. That all volcanoes are erupting in chain reaction is a warning. Now, it does not anticipate the end of the world. It is simply a metamorphosis, a change, a transformation. Can we make these changes less traumatic? Yes, but we need to unite many people with the same intention to create that positive collective mental state. The human being lives unaware of the unlimited potentials he has. But really, when people unite with the same intention, nothing is impossible. I cite a case that I had mentioned in a previous program. A hurricane was coming directly against El Salvador, and CNN had already calculated how many people were going to die from that hurricane. Then, President Don Antonio Elias Saca joined all Salvadorians that they all held hands regardless of their religious beliefs, and that all pray for the country, and the hurricane stopped and turned on itself in 2005 and changed course and went to Guatemala, but did not reach El Salvador. So things like that happen when many people come together with the same intention.
Juan Andres Salfate joins this conversation with True Lies.
Very much, brother. We know each other very well and for so long. How are you?
We were talking about many topics here. People were asking, and I know that Juan Andres is also a great connoisseur of this topic, and he also has questions that you want to ask Sixto. Please.
One thing I wanted to ask you for a long time, even what we come to understand about what you also informed us in your talks. The presence of the extraterrestrials, the Elder Brothers, who have made some support of cultural evolution, a kind of accompaniment, very subtle, very diplomatic. My question is, could they, in view of the fact, as a product of human stupidity reaching its maximum level, as the last sayings of the current President of the United States, Donald Trump, that someone wanted to start a third world war, understanding the tremendous disaster that this would imply, that there was a direct intervention getting out of the state of non-coaxial on the part of the aliens and putting a stop to all this because the effect would be disastrous?
Yes, they would.
Has there been any direct intervention by them at some point in the history of these entities without this humanity being aware, but only those involved? Hey, let's stop here, because this is terrible.
To its leaders.
Have you had the opportunity to have encounters? Perfect. The great moment of the movie when there is the possibility of eating a steak that you know doesn't exist, but you decide to have it anyway.
Regarding the Jesus issue, if this could not be revealed, why would it somehow drive the church out of its dominance over cultures?
We are going to review some images, and I would like us to rule out whether they are real or false, because we also have the over information. What we are seeing is a UFO over the Temple of the Rock in Jerusalem captured in 2011 that attracted the most attention due to the clarity of the image. Because of the place where it occurs, what does Sixto Paz say?
That is false.
Why?
Because it is heard. I mean, in the original video, you hear the impressions, the emotions of the witnesses, and they do not correspond to the event they are looking at. I mean, the reactions are, oh, how nice and everything. Also, in the Mosque of the Rock, there are Israeli guards, the Palestinian guards. Therefore, it is false.
By the law of physics that one knows.
To the testimony of people, witnesses. A1. Why? Because today you can do anything with images. So, to return to the testimony, for that, when we began with the contact in 74, they, as evidence, always gave us the ability to invite journalists to meetings scheduled in advance. Then there's a video from July of 2014 where we went with 55 people from our contact groups to the pyramids of Teotihuacan, and we were there with the important media of Mexico. We were there from 10:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. The history of humanity will make no sense. But now it all ends. They told me that 1200 million years ago, the planet Earth died, product of the impact of meteoric rain that wiped out life on the planet and wiped out the Earth. The Earth became puree. It became dust. I mean, the Earth disappeared. Now for the aliens, the time in the universe is like an ascending spiral. In one of the curves of the spiral, the Earth died, and the universe continued. Then, a group of aliens received authorization from cosmic hierarchies to travel through time and space and come to Earth before the Earth died and prevent it from dying, thereby creating a paradoxical alternative time that has been twisting with the real time of the universe. According to the aliens, they told us that we live in a virtual reality, in a large-scale simulation, which allows those beings to enter our reality and leave our reality, for which they move through the dimensions. Now, what scientific proof could there be to justify what I'm saying? On March 3 of 2009, the Hanover Gravitational Wave Detector in Germany, the GEO 600, captured echoes from the ends of the universe that led the scientist Greg Hogan to the conclusion that we live in a hologram, in a virtual reality. In 2010, John Poplaski of the University of Indiana came to the conclusion that all the alterations of the sun and in each and every one of the planets of the solar system, not only on Earth, was caused by climate change, but that all alterations in the solar system was that of a dimensional portal was opening, a wormhole that would swallow the entire solar system. Then, in February of 2014, Michio Kaku, this American scientist with Japanese parents who has a television program there on the Discovery Channel, declared that quantum physics would be confirming that we live in a hologram, in a virtual reality in a large-scale simulation. That is published in a book in 1986 based on the experience of the contact that we had. Now, time does not pass for pleasure because now these two times should run parallel and allow them to experience this reality, take information, and take it to their reality, which is what happens. As they interacted more than it was expected when they fought for us, there were some who made themselves worship as gods and took entire towns as their particular fiefdom or feud. By hybridizing with us, by doing a series of things that were transgressions that should never have happened, they have made real time begin to approach the alternate time, at the risk of coming into one, which is what happened. That is why the Mayans in the Chilam Balam de Chumayel prophecy, the turn of time or the synchronization of times, the Aztecs had the idea that the time in the universe was like a serpent with two heads. At the end of times, one head would be eating the other one, but which one? So the group of extraterrestrials who were afraid that humanity could put their own existence at risk and wanted to stop this from happening, in the end, all their nightmares came true. Why? Because they managed to get real time together with alternate time, and a third time emerged. For us, things have not changed much as of December 21st of 2012, because they have already changed from before. For those who have changed things, even retroactively, it is for the aliens. We have changed their history. So much so that we are making them forget the before, during, and after the cosmic plan. That is why they have left the memory of the universe engraved in the human DNA. You know that 3 to 4% of human genetics material is your genetic inheritance, and the other 96 to 97 remaining, until recently, it was thought to be junk DNA. It was useless, but Nick Goldman of the European Institute of Bioinformatics announced that synthetic DNA had been developed, and that in the synthetic DNA, it had been possible to record up to 100 million hours of high definition. If that could be recorded in synthetic DNA, what could be recorded in natural DNA? And Russian scientists considered that 97% to be recordable or rewritable. So we are the memory of the universe. So now they are protecting us because we are going to allow them to remember and engage in this new reality.
We are going to review some images, and I would like us to rule out whether they are real or false, because we also have the over information. What we are seeing is a UFO over the Temple of the Rock in Jerusalem captured in 2011 that attracted the most attention due to the clarity of the image. Because of the place where it occurs, what does Sixto Paz say?
That it is false.
Why?
Because it is heard. I mean, in the original video, you hear the impressions, the emotions of the witnesses, and they do not correspond to the event they are looking at. I mean, the reactions are, aha, oh, how nice, and everything. Also, in the Mosque of the Rock, there are Israeli guards, the Palestinian guards. Therefore, it's false.
By the law of physics that one knows.
What Sixto says is true, and unless it is a concerted sighting, there is generally more than one record, and not just one, when there is something more powerful that is above the city.
Let's see the next video. This one happened in Guatemala. This is about the Temple of the Jaguar in Guatemala. This video broadcast on social networks shows the flying object launching a vertical ray towards the Temple of the Great Jaguar located in Tikal. There we are seeing the image. Of course, as in Jerusalem, there it goes fast into the sky. There we can see these images of this UFO record. It is not usual.
It is a cover-up. The young people who are here, experts in graphic design and communication sciences, will really know how easy it is to make this type of montage of tricks. Corrado Balducci precisely said that with the development of graphic design and image technology, we had to go back to the beginning, to the testimony of people, witnesses, A1. Why? Because today you can do anything with images. So, to return to the testimony for that we began with the contact in 74. They, as evidence, always give us the ability to invite journalists to meetings scheduled in advance. Then there is a video from July of 2014 where we went with 55 people from our contact groups to the pyramids of Teotihuacan, and we were there with important media of Mexico. We were there from 10:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon, and 6 objects appear in the sky making evolutions against the wind in all shapes, half-moon objects in the shape of an angel, in the shapes of spheres. And the most interesting thing is that what is interesting is not so much the images, but the testimony of the journalists. At the beginning,
well,
they
my
said,
heart
well,
right now
Sixto Paz has invited us here to a public
right
place in
so
front
I
of
asked
thousands
him
of
what he was doing
tourists.
there.
It is not a place of
he been
the
there?
desert or anything. And in the end, you hear them saying, it was incredible. It was 6 objects. Well, precisely, we invited for the 5th time to a scheduled meeting there in the Chilca Desert, south of Lima. Look, I am a young man there in that video. You can hear the one doing the mentralization. It's me. So we called the press, and the journalists were witnesses of the appearance of the objects at the height of about 80 meters. They could photograph it, take pictures, they could record it. Journalists such as Leticia Callava from Channel 51 in Miami, Jose Gray from Channel 23 of Univision, Beatriz Parga of the Miami Herald, and all of them attest in the video that they witnessed the appearance of the ship. So, this video is true. And at this meeting, it was not only me. The important thing is that there were 40 journalists from 8 countries summoned to this meeting, and they were witnesses, and also after that, they were victims of the information censorship. That is, they were prevented from making the news known worldwide. For news like that, it was like getting really exclusive.